Cumulus clouds are those large, white, fluffy clouds that we use to illustrate with cotton balls on craft paper. And Cumulus is also the name of the company headed up by Matthew Kleiman that focuses on enhancing safety and efficiency for safer work environments. And they also focus on mission critical work, doing the right thing the first time with detail and commitment. And so those principles are so valuable for anyone, whether an entrepreneur or whether a large business. It's an important life principle. And we cover them today, so stay tuned. This podcast is brought to you by DJ Works Media and HalftimeSuccess.com, offering resources and insights for those at mid-career or the halftime of life. Explore our diverse categories, including courses, coaching, health, music, software, and travel. We're here to help you make this stage of life your best ever. So get our new articles, downloads, and podcasts by signing up for weekly updates at goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello. I'm so excited to have another amazing guest with us today, Matthew. Thank you for joining us. And boy, we have a lot to talk about today and some big things to talk about.
Hey, Deborah, great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show.
And we just talked about how wonderful it is that we can do this with technology, that we are across the country from each other. At least we're not around the world from each other, but our time frames would be a little different. But it's really amazing how I get to meet guests from all over, and just really happy to meet you and find out a little bit more about you. I usually like my guests to talk about themselves because I have been a part of the entertainment world where someone will read your full bio before you walk out on stage, and it just kills it. You know, they want to hear from the artist. And I want to hear from the guest. And so, Matthew, give us a little background of where you came from and why you're doing what you're doing right now.
Sure. So where I am now, I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Cumulus, and we are a quality management system for mission critical work in industrial settings. So basically making sure workers know what they're supposed to do, and we confirm that the work was actually done properly to avoid accidents, rework, and other problems. My background is kind of a winding road. I started out in the aerospace business, working at an aerospace company here in the Boston area that does guidance systems for aircraft and spacecraft. And after the Deepwater Horizon disaster, that's the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, we started working with energy companies to bring in capabilities from the aerospace world that makes airplanes as safe as they are today into energy to try to prevent something like the Deepwater Horizon disaster from happening again. Doing that for a few years, eventually I was hired by Shell to start a whole center inside of Shell to improve safety and reliability at facilities throughout the supply chain. And that's where I came across the problem that led to Cumulus, which was the problem of work quality in the field and rework and how costly that is and what a big safety issue that is for both workers and other people at these facilities. And so 6 years ago, I left Shell with my co-founders, and we started Cumulus to solve this problem and grow it into what it is today.
Oh, how fun. Now, and looked in your bio, you have even a JD degree. Are you an attorney as well, or you have that background?
Way back when, I thought that's what I wanted to be. So I did go to law school, but I haven't practiced in a very long time. I practiced for a few years after I left law school, but I ended up, while I was in law school, I was the co-founder of a biotech company and decided I liked the entrepreneurial world a heck of a lot more than I liked being a lawyer. So after working for a few years, earning a little nest egg to pay off my law school loans, it was time to go into the business world and be on the other side of the table. But I love that I went to law school and people ask me if they should go. I think it's incredibly valuable even today, and just how to think and understand the world of business and contracts. But no, I haven't been a practicing attorney for a very long time.
Yeah, but it's a great background. And in fact, my husband always told me, you should have been an attorney. So no, it was a lot of paperwork. We have a son who's an attorney, I think,
Yep,
but he also has developed a business on the side. So, I mean, there's that fulfillment, there's that entrepreneurship. And if you can do that, that's great. It depends on the field you're in, I think. So, well, let's get, when I think of Cumulus, I always think of those big fluffy clouds. But so it's a great name. But I mean, it's what they do, and, they cause, with the rain and everything coming down. But there are a lot of companies now, big companies, especially with quality control. When you mentioned the airline industry or the aerospace, some major problems we've come past years.
Major issues. Yeah.
Quality control. I mean, every time you get on one of those planes, it's like, okay, I hope this one doesn't have the door fall off, or, something, in the mid-flight.
It's a great point. And what Boeing's recent troubles really illustrate is, despite all of the automation and all the process, and as advanced as these companies are,
yes,
at some point, a human being has to go out and do critical work. And and we often forget that. And we also, and we think we can just paper over things with process and more checklists and more instructions. But if we don't make sure that the worker, one, has the information that he or she needs to do the work, and then have an objective way of verifying that the work was done, which often we don't. And Boeing is the biggest example that whoever the worker that worked on that door, for whatever reason, didn't put the bolts back in, and that wasn't caught before the plane went into service, ferrying hundreds of passengers around. It's crazy to think about, but that kind of thing happens in the industrial world and in construction all the time.
Wow.
And in aerospace, it's the fact that it happens so infrequently shows how good aerospace is generally, and that's why everybody's so shocked at what happened with Boeing. And but in the construction world, the statistics are that 30% of work is done improperly. So imagine if in aerospace, 30% of planes were leaving the factory with quality issues like that. Now, that's not the case, because the aerospace industry has generally become very good, and it's the exception that proves the rule. But in construction, industrial operations, these types of things are happening all the time, and it's a huge cost financially, and it's a very big issue with safety.
And you think about even your home construction and everything that you have, you want to make sure stuff's done right. And, man, we faced a lot of things. Of course, we had bought an older home, so of course they just had no guidelines at that point, I think, but hardly any. But anyway, but it really is. And I think your point on this digital transformation, I mean, that's kind of where I wanted to kind of dive in, and you gave a great intro on that, because with the growth of AI, there has to be a human. In fact, I just did some research for another article. And, a book was quoted. I couldn't find the book anywhere. And it was and they quoted it from this book. You always check sources. I found another source, but it was, you always have to check, because you don't know if it's correct. The Chat GPT, it's wonderful to use. It's great. It's free, but you got to check the sources. So
you got to check 100%. Absolutely.
How do you deal with that with, integrating some of it, the digital transformation, as well? You don't want to disrupt like the current, all of the operations. And what are you doing? And it's specifically, I guess, into the construction industry, but it really applies across the board. How do you integrate some of that with some of those safety guidelines?
So it's a great question. So I'm giving a talk in November at a conference in London, and it's about don't forget the human element of digital transformation.
Wonderful.
Don't lose your humanity in your digital transformation, because it's not about just taking robots and replacing the people. That is not where we are from a technology perspective. Even some of the most incredible technologies like ChatGPT are wrong a lot, as you pointed out.
Yes.
So you
Always
can't.
check.
So it's going to be a very long time before bots are taking anybody's job, with the exception of a few areas where it is good. But for in construction, certainly it's not the case. So what we always try to tell people is they have to walk before they can run. What a lot of companies who have failed digital transformations do is they see whatever's sexy in technology, whether it's AI like ChatGPT or drones or other sorts of, or VR, AR technology, and they want to use it because that's what their boards are looking for. That's what's exciting. It makes great marketing videos. But if you go into an industrial plant that doesn't even have a Wi-Fi network and you try to bring in any of these things, you're going to fail, and then you're going to say, "Oh, all this stuff is junk. It doesn't work." Or you might make a great video by jury rigging something, and then it makes no lasting change. So it's really important to think of digital transformation almost like a layer cake or a wedding cake, where you have to start at the base and make sure that as a legacy industrial company, you have the basics of going digital, like consistent Wi-Fi across the plant. Everybody have a mobile device that they could use that can actually access networks. All these things are often, they're not fun. They're not exciting. They're not, somebody else does them. So people forget and they want to skip steps. So the first thing is do that. Second, make sure that the humans who are working at your facility or on your project are part of the system. Humans are not something to be contracted away or somebody else's problem, and we just want to work on the cool tech. It's these people have years of experience. They're the ones who ultimately have to install those bolts or whatever the work is, and the goal is to help them do their jobs better, not either try to replace them or somehow be a big brother checking on them. If you come at it with that mindset, you're going to fail. So those are the two big things that we tell people when working with these legacy industries: get the basics right, and humans are part of your system.
And that's so important because a lot of my audience are those who at mid-career have time of life. And what drives me most of all is there are people that are many sitting on skills, sitting on experience, sitting on all of their resources at this point in their life. According to the internet, halftime is age 40, which comes really, really fast, as many people know.
That's scary.
No, it's really, but usually it's, it's after that. People are making some sort of change, or they want to do something else. They decide, oh, I'm not going to be an attorney anymore full time. I want to develop something on the side, whatever. But they're discounting some of those skills. And that's exactly what you're talking about. We need those people. We need those people to balance out. There's so much fear about, and the press is just, the big culprit in a lot of this. But because, fear and bad news sells. I have a friend that's worked at a news, she was with a newspaper for years managing. And she said that was one of the main mantras is bad news sells. So, of course, fear. Oh, that's going to sell. Oh, the bad, all of this is going to sell. So they're going to take over your jobs. The robots, everybody's coming for, nobody's going to, that's not true. And it really makes people discount what they have and those soft skills or the experience. And I think that's so, so important. And it's such an important message that you are spreading with that as well.
Yeah. The expression that it's not mine, somebody else created it, but it's not that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI will. Yeah. So it's important, again, going back to humans are part of the system.
Right.
Part of the system of AI. Understand how it's used, understand how it can make you as as a worker, whatever job you're in, more productive, more effective. Whether almost using AI as a thought partner. That's what I've started using ChatGPT for. I have to do board meetings every couple of months, and not only do I use AI to help me prepare board materials, but I also role play with AI. Hey, you're a venture capital investor, and this is the slide deck I'm showing you. What questions might you have?
Yes.
And it's really amazing.
Amazing. It's amazing. Yes.
And how it can take that persona almost as the consultant in your pocket, and just make you that much more effective, so that when I do have to get to my board meeting, I'm that much more prepared than I would have been otherwise. So yeah, and the scary part about jobs, I mean, there's in construction, and that's the industry I know the best. We have a 200,000 just in the United States. There's 200,000 workers short of what's needed to actually complete all the work out there. And there's many other industries that are having the same issues. There's a real shortage of skilled labor in all kinds of areas, white collar, blue collar. And because a lot of people have just taken themselves out of the workforce and said, I'm doomed because of whatever the reason is. And there's a lot of opportunity, but that mantra, it's not about being afraid of AI. Sure, you know how to use it, and makes you much more competitive than anybody else who's out there, and could give you a lot really good ideas.
And you can kind of create a lot of your job at that point. You can create almost a job like definition of what you can do, because I love listening. Well, part of it is his voice, but Mike Rowe and all about the trades and how, he started a whole nonprofit on being able to equip with education with the trades, because there are a lot of students that are very, very, that's what will drive them, being in some sort of trade. And we are so low on, plumbers, on, the things that you have to have people. I'm not going to tell AI I have a plumbing problem. I'm going to call a plumber. What about an electrician? No, I got to call the guy, because
that GPT cannot unclog your toilet for you.
No, cannot. And not everybody wants to do those things. But I tell you, when you find the people that do like them, I use them over and over and over. And it is worth it to be able to have those people. So, and just an encouragement that those are great jobs and great skills. A lot of times you can make your own hours. You can do all of that with the trades. As you said, 200,000 that we are lacking in construction. That's amazing. I mean, getting somebody to, redo a fireplace at our house. I mean, we can hardly get anybody. They're busy all the time. They're busy. They're booked like another year.
Unless you have a really big job, getting people to do small things is really hard. And you're right. When you find somebody who's reliable and responsive, then you stick with them and keep getting them work over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's very true. You trust them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, now let's get it, because you work with a lot of corporate and corporate spin-outs, but yet startups as well. And so what about in some of that heavy industry? And I want you to describe what you mean by heavy industry. How do they contribute to like modernizing the maintenance and the construction? And so that's kind of in part of what you do. So I kind of wanted you to explain that a little bit for us.
So there are as a generalization, there are three types of construction. You have residential construction, which probably most of us are pretty familiar with, whether you're a homeowner or you've seen homeowners or renters. That's building and repairing houses. Then you have commercial construction, which is apartment buildings, office buildings, kind of what you would see driving around any city or mid-sized town. And then you have industrial or heavy construction. And that's largely the world that I live in, which is building chemical plants, data centers, semiconductor fab facilities, building manufacturing. A lot of people talk about the reshoring of manufacturing back into the country. Well, all that work about rebuilding an industrial base, that's heavy construction. So anything that is more complex, more challenging than your, cookie cutter apartment building or office building is going to be in that heavy construction. And it also typically means when things go wrong, they go very, and that's, certainly a worker getting hurt in any type of construction is a terrible thing to happen. But then when you have an explosion at a chemical plant that not only affects the workers, but affects the surrounding communities and everything else, that's where my company tends to focus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And to your question about how do startups play in there, obviously a startup, my company, we have 28 people. We're small by any standard. We're not going to come and be the data center or operate a chemical plant, but we find a very specific problem that we are very, very good at solving. And we come in as almost the special forces, and in this case, it's work quality, to solve that problem for our customers.
I like that, special forces. So I tell you what, I'm a strong supporter on how important our military is. And so when you're talking special forces those guys are always putting their lives on the line. So, but there are instances where those safeguards aren't in place. I mean, I have an uncle that, a chemical explosion, he was gone. So there's those tragedies in the past. And, I never got any of the details. Who knows? So, some of those buildings, and it was many years ago. So that's why, there's a lot of stuff that just gets buried. But now there's a little bit more of that accountability or else, legally, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So that does explain especially with the construction, all of the different steps and how important that is, but how it applies to all of us too, and putting those safeguards in place. So, and I know you've got some examples of that and the attention to detail that takes. Can you just kind of quickly tell of maybe an example of something you put in place? Yeah.
One example that we were able to publish pretty recently is with a new chemical plant that we were part of building in Pennsylvania. And they were able to implement our system for piping, for assembling pipes. You can imagine a chemical plant has thousands and thousands of pipes that are carrying oftentimes hazardous materials. So it's really important that they don't leak. Well, before they brought our technology in, there were about 10% of the piping connections at this plant, which is very much industry standard, would leak when they did pressure testing on those piping connections.
Okay.
So you can imagine there's 100,000 connections and 10,000 of them would have leaks that have to be dealt with. Put the safety issue aside, just the cost of the leaks and redoing it and all that work, it's very costly, and there's safety and environmental impact as well. Well, when they brought our technology in, that went down from 10% to 0.1%, simply because, to your point about attention to detail, what our technology does, making sure the workers knew what the procedures were to follow and validating that, yes, they did follow the procedure. Relatively straightforward of a concept, but that just doesn't typically happen in a typical industrial construction project. And making sure everybody's being walked through the process step by step and it's being validated and checked, that solved the problem for the most part. And we see those types of results over and over and over again, just making people slow down to go fast. So slow down to do it right the first time. Don't have to redo it, because redoing it is what's gonna cost a lot financially. It's gonna cost a lot in terms of budget, and it's gonna cost a lot in time. Just take the time to do it right the first time and don't rush through it. You're gonna get much better results.
Wow. What a great word of
advice. To anything. That can be applied to anything in life, not just industrial construction.
Totally. I mean, we could end right now with that little point. That is, but we're not. But that is such a great point because we rush through things, and something that you mentioned too, when you come in with your system. Well, okay, you're not coming in and all of a sudden hooking everything up to a computerized something.
Nope.
You are training the employees to take their time and go through all of the checklists. And it was a human element. A lot of times it's a human element.
And going back to
That's it.
to the Boeing example that we started with, imagine if there was a system that made sure that whoever was installing that bolt couldn't skip the steps to reinstall the bolt, which is what they did in one way or another. It's still investigations, but that's what they did. They weren't taking their time. They were rushing for some reason, and they forgot it. They forgot the step, and we saw what happened.
And we are always, I mean, all of us are guilty of that, rushing through.
But everybody is.
Everybody was in a hurry.
A couple of years ago, I was fixing something on my daughter's bike, and I take the wheel off, put the wheel back on, tightened the bolts, and off she went to ride the bike. And she came back and said, something feels weird about this. And it turns out I just hadn't tightened the bolt quite enough on the bike. And I fixed it, and it was fine. But I got a lot of ribbing from my wife, who said, "Isn't this what you do for a living?" And how did that happen?
Yeah,
I said, I wasn't using our system. I was just doing this in our garage. That's why it happened. But we all do.
Yep. That's just like a spouse to mention that too.
Exactly. We do this for a living.
That's okay.
There's our work selves and our home selves, and it's very different.
Yeah, but it's good. It's a good checkpoint for all of us. There's a reason God put them in our lives. Okay, so that's that one. So everyone wants to kind of modernize and keep up with everything, and to be competitive. So what sort of challenges are there? And you talk about legacy industries, and I'm assuming those are the ones that have been around forever. And they do want to modernize, but they've had the same people there for a long time, and that a lot of them know it all. They know it all. So how do you come in with companies like that to modernize? Because I'm sure you do that plenty as well.
It goes, you're 100% right. That is one of the biggest challenges we have when we go into companies where people have been there for decades, doing things the same way, and either and you say, well, there's a different way to do things, and it's, well, that's not how the last person who had this job, so why should I do it any differently? That we see that over and over and over again. And there's a couple of ways to go about dealing with it. One, it goes back to the point I made earlier about making the people part of the process. It's not, it can't be something that's imposed on people. It has to be, and it can't be punitive or, hey, you guys don't know what you're doing. You guys are slackers. You can't, even if they're having quality issues and productivity issues, you can't come at solving the problem with that point of view and that mindset, because that's going to immediately put people on the defensive.
Right.
So it's very much about, how are we going to improve their work experience? How are we going to make their jobs easier? How are we going to protect them? Because when something does go wrong, the workers are the first ones to be in the line of fire, so to speak, both safety perspective, but also in terms of blame after the fact. And we have tons of examples of where we've saved people's jobs because we were able to show, no, they did do whatever it is do properly. And you have to look somewhere else for the blame of why something went wrong. And oftentimes it might have been a manufacturing defect in the equipment or something else, but it's very easy to say, oh, the workers made a mistake. So we have spent a lot of time thinking about making sure that the workers are benefiting from using our system as much as the management and executives are benefiting from the type of data and quality assurance we're able to provide. So it's really thinking about it systematically, taking things step by step, not trying to do what I like to call innovation theater, which is, well, we're going to make you all wear these AR goggles and you're going to be so much better at your job. And it's like, no, we're not going to go out into our chemical plant wearing these silly looking goggles that give us neck injuries and that stuff. It's just being thoughtful and methodical and taking things in the right order.
That's great. I mean, that's just really, really important points that you made through there. So, and a part of the process, so that's a big leadership skill and team building and the whole thing is how important that is. And as companies grow, and there's growing pains, but that's kind of part of that, part of all of that. Well, I think we talked already about the importance of the attention to detail and how, your illustration of just, making sure in that one company that had all of those, the 10%, with the leaks, and all of a sudden it went down to, what was it, 0.1 or 0.01? Yeah, whatever. And it was very, very low then, just because of the attention to detail and how that is important and how that applies to us. So now let's talk a little bit more about technology and the kind of reducing kind of the rework and improving the sustainability, because you're all about sustainability in many ways too. And so are there some examples of that you can give and that would help those of us, that are entrepreneurial as well? But there's a lot of different businesses that will be kind of listening to the gamut of what this message is. Yeah.
I think something that's generally applicable is the concept of hidden lost time. There are things that we do in our personal lives and our professional lives where we are losing time every day, minutes, hours, days, just because we're waiting around for things. And that is in many ways why one of the motivations that we had to start the company is, in our case, people were waiting around for inspectors to come and inspect something. And well, how do you figure out a different way? You're not waiting around for inspectors. You're getting to do your work, and the system with technology is doing the work of the inspector. So is validating that the work is done properly, and saving, in that case, hours of time that a worker would spend just waiting, just say, okay, we finished this work. Let's put in the request for the inspector to come so that we can move on and do the next thing. And that is all what we called hidden lost time, because nobody was recording that as that wait time for the inspector to come. Nobody was recording that. And that type of thing happens all the time in people's daily lives. So for an entrepreneur, I would say, because the best thing you can sell that someone will buy is time, because people want time back. So if you could sell time, by making something go faster or making them not have to wait around.
Wow.
And whatever the work, the activity is, personal, professional, whatever it might be, you think of some of the most successful technology companies over the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
What they're fundamentally selling you is time. Think about Amazon.com, right? So you don't have to go out to the mall to buy things anymore, or you can go with a lot more focus, because all the other stuff you just buy online, and it makes it really easy. Uber, whatever company you have, they're selling you time, and people often don't think that way. And if you do, that's something that people could pay a lot of money for.
This I've always, one of my mantras is, your time is one of your best, most valuable resources. Yep. You only have so much. You can't buy back the years. You can't buy back the minutes. You can't, it's gone and it's gone.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. And that's the, kind of the warning signs too of too much technology, because I talk about this as well. I have this course, A New Way of Doing Business. Everybody wants to go to the third section, which is all on automation and on the technology tool. Oh, it's so much fun. I tell you what, you can go on rabbit trails on all of that. You use the basics. The basics are the basics. You keep the basics.
100%.
And then you add those sort of tools that are going to save you time, not take so much time. And I have bought tools and I've returned them because I knew they're going to be a time sucker. I don't have that type of time. I have a certain amount of time and a certain routine that I follow, and I'm very routine oriented. Yep. So, but I put out a ton of product, and it's because I value that time and I value a system. So I don't want to I do incorporate new tools, but they can't be time suckers. They just can't. You're going to have a certain amount of a learning curve, period. It doesn't matter. Right. I mean, one of my main programs I've used for years, which is in music notation software. I bought the very first version of that. I mean, when I did my graduate work and my thesis, and all of my work was done by hand because the music typewriters were so expensive. I had some things published at the time, but you send it all in. You sent all the handwork. So you'd end up with these black fingers. That's okay because it's kind of music quill, all of the stuff where you do. Now everything's on the computer. Well, now this particular company is phasing out, and all of a sudden we have to think about a new system. Oh, really? After all of these years, the one that will gain my business will be the one that's easy to transfer and that's very, very similar, because I've been on the program so long. I have a lot of music out, a lot of scores and scores. So it has to be easy enough. I know there's going to be a learning curve, but it has to be easy enough. So I think as you talk about technology, as you talk about all of those tools putting into place, the time, that is such a great point.
Yeah. And your point about, this goes back to the question you asked earlier about legacy industries. Yes. They look at technology the same way you're thinking about the music typewriter, is that they're saying, yes, there will be a learning curve. There will be time to implement, but it has to be a net saver of time, not something that makes my job more difficult. And that's one of the biggest reasons why technology products fail, is because they're not a net saver of time. And people get frustrated and they say, forget it. I'm not using this anymore.
Right. And it's a very, very good point. A very good principle there that you have to remember. And if you are a software developer, you want to make sure that it's an easy enough ramp to be able to, have people learn your system. So, well, that we just talked about that a little bit on that question, and examples of maybe some digitalization that's made some impact. And is there anything then in you're specifically more into the construction business and all of that. So is there an example that will maybe come across the board to help others as they listen?
Sure. I think, to the point we were just talking about, something that is new technology, but is a net saver of time. One of the most effective things that we've introduced into the construction site are connected tools. So replacing old style tools that workers are using, like, think about wrenches and temperature gauges and things like that. That's what I mean by tools. Tool the worker is going to use in their hands. And there's brand new types of tools that work the same way as those old tools, but that you can connect to a mobile device to do things, to take a lot of the tedious work away from the worker. So, for example, with a torque wrench that's tightening bolts that I could have really used when I was fixing my daughter's bike, that one of the things workers have to do is they have to set what the target torque value is. And that's an error-prone activity. Well, now we can just do that automatically with the system. Where the worker doesn't have to set it. It's connected to a mobile device, just like by Bluetooth. So just like you connect a pair of headphones,
Yes.
and the system knows, okay, the worker is about to start this type of work,
Right.
the target torque value, so that how tight the bolt has to be is X, and it sets that automatically. So
Amazing.
the worker is not tightening the bolt any differently than they would have before. It works, the physics and the engineering work the same way, but you're taking some of that tedium out of it, and goes back to, just saving them time and
Yes.
preventing one of the most error prone parts of their job,
Mhm.
making that something they don't have to think about anymore.
I love that. And I immediately thought about putting air in my bike tire. Okay. So
Yep.
we have this now great gadget because you can put air in and you know exactly how much is in it. And
Yeah,
you don't have to take it out and go
great
to
analogy.
another something to see what, how much is it. So
Right.
what you are doing, it's the same principle though. The hookup is the
Beautiful.
same. So yeah, I think that takes away some of the fear for those that are
Right.
worried about all of this. And for some of the creators, because boy, if you're an entrepreneur and you are creating, listen to that message. Very, very strong and clear how important that is. And that's great in modernizing and helping to move ahead. I think we've really, boy, you
Covered all
answered
the
a lot
ground.
of my questions today. I want to know just real quick, what's next for you and for Cumulus and for your business? And also, because this will all be in the show notes. Sometimes I write articles on guests podcasts as well. So, and I come out with articles every single week anyway. So you want to make sure you get those. But the what's next for you, and just verbalize how people can find out more about you and your business.
Sure. Well, what's next for our business? We are embracing AI by the horns and incorporating that into almost everything we do, both internally and into our product. And I am, as much as there are limitations, like we talked about with what AI could do today, I am incredibly excited about its potential and have seen how it can help both my own employees, but also our customers as well. So there's a lot of stuff coming there over the coming months and year or so, that all different ways, whether it's helping get set up, a system set up faster, where AI is doing a lot of the work, just the grunt work of system setup, and go over to evaluating photos and things like that to identify potential quality issues. We are incorporating all of that into the system. So that's from a technology perspective where we're going. The best way to get in touch with me probably is LinkedIn. I am pretty active there. Just Matthew Kleiman, Cumulus, type that in and you'll find me. And I do respond to people who aren't just trying to sell me things. I get a lot of on
Boy, I
LinkedIn.
get a lot of those.
Get a lot of those, but no, that's I am active on it, and that's the best way to reach me. You could also reach me by email, Matt at Cumulus DS for Cumulus Digital Systems.com, and check out our website, same URL. But LinkedIn is the best way to get to me.
Perfect. For those that are just listening, then they'll get that. And always look at the show notes too, because I put that on. I put out videos with these as well as the audio. So, and sometimes an article. So that's always, but make sure if you've hung with us all this way, thank you very much, by the way. But goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. It's easy. You can unsubscribe anytime, but if you want to make sure you're getting all the podcasts and the articles. And I'm not hard sell ever. I've never been. I just don't like people to do that to me. But it's what's coming out and what's new. I have a lot of things always coming out because I have a lot of product, but also a lot of podcasts. I've taken more guests. And so I've got now that comes out twice a week, and usually just with announcements or with the bonus podcast, because I've taken those. So thank you so much, Matthew, for being with us today. What a fascinating interview. This was really fun for me. My dad was, of course, as firemen are, he was a fire captain, but he also was in construction. So I grew up, he had really the biggest cement tool at that point in the US. They were, everywhere until they're technology was stolen. How about that?
I know.
But I kind of grew up with all those handles and, and I loved being around the shops and that still fascinates me. I love the smell of, fresh wood and all of that stuff. But it's a wonderful and important business. And so I appreciate what you are doing, especially all of us. We should really appreciate that. And that principle, every time we get on an airplane now, that we want to make sure there's checks and balances. Is that correct?
That's not right.
Well, thanks again. And thank you all for listening, for those of you who have hung with us. And I will look forward to being with everyone again next time. This is always fun. I just love this format, being able to bring these messages and many guests from all over the world. So thanks again, Matthew, for being with us. And thank you all for joining us. And
thanks, Deborah. Great to be here.
Bye. Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.